John, with regard to racism, I recently heard you supporting comments made by Liam Neeson. I was just wondering whether you still stand by this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because...
So should we just remind people, these are comments by Liam Neeson when he was promoting his film, and he was talking about an incident of a friend of his who had apparently been raped. She said she was raped by someone who was black, and he said that it made him feel that he wanted revenge, and he went out and for a week or so...
Yeah. So first of all,
he wanted to look for... was hoping someone black, anyone black, would pick a fight with him and that he would kill them.
So first of all, you have to listen to the context in terms of what he was and the nuanced conversation that took place. He was talking about the act of revenge. So let's get the idea of a race out of it just to begin with. He's talking about, his film is about revenge. He's talking about the act of revenge and how it can eat you up, how it's all-encompassing and how it's a terrible feeling. So he started talking about Northern Ireland. He started talking about the problems that they had when he was growing up in Ireland. He then veered away from that to talk about an incident of revenge that affected him. If you look at an Irish friend of mine explained it to me, when you are been brought up in Northern Ireland, and we can see the problems that through Brexit may or may not happen, and he's aware of that, when something happens to a member of your religion, if you're Catholic, then your vitriol, your hatred is to any Protestant, or any Catholic if it happens to a Protestant, not the particular one who actually implemented the hurt on that person. So that is why I'm talking about the feeling that he actually had is a feeling of revenge, and he had feelings of remorse. He had those feelings for 1 week. Now, why I have to give him credit is because as much as we all want to say we view people as equal, we don't, and we have to admit it, because we are influenced by our environment, and the environment he came from, albeit from a Catholic and Protestant point of view, is whoever the enemy is, we have to kill the enemy. The enemy at that particular time happened to be black, but it equally could have been English, and he would have wanted to kill any Englishman. So, but those holier than thou who says how terrible it is, it's a disgrace. What is the truth about the way we all feel about people of different races, different religions? We all discriminate. And we have to admit it. And not only do we admit it, why I'm happy to say that I discriminate unconsciously is because the environment I've been brought up in that shows me that, and it continues to show me that. You read the newspapers every day and you hear about Muslim terrorists and Nigerian gangs, and that gives you a negative impression, not just of terrorists and of con men or gangs, but also Nigerians and Muslims. And this is the influence that society has on us.
So there we go. That was John Barnes talking about how the environment impacts our views on communities and minorities. Essentially saying that we are all technically racist subconsciously. Now this is very interesting, and I think we should explore this because we've been looking at the snowflake generation for quite a while now in the last 3 episodes. And this is very interesting because it raises questions about why we have a snowflake generation now. Pick up on one of the main points he says. He said that our environment impacts the way we perceive things. We see things in the news about Muslims and Nigerians, so we then develop a view upon those people. And this is true. If you were to choose between a house in a white community, middle class, or one which is with a Muslim community or an Arab community, you'll find that probably most people would prefer to live in the white community. Now, what is interesting is we kind of looked at this in episode 2 when we looked at international community versus the homogeneous community, because what we found with an island mentality, you find that people tend to be more subconsciously discriminatory compared to those in the international community. And this can explain why we have a snowflake generation at the moment. You see, in the last 100 years, globalization, cultural integration, cultural diversity is really just a new factor, one which has only really been seen to have grand effects in the 21st century. So for our generation, which has grown up in this cultural diverse community, it makes sense that we would have less of a racial discrimination subconsciously, because we have grown up in a more accepting and more wider community. Now, this isn't to say that we don't have one, because of course there are people who are more liberal than others, people who will still discriminate. Even the most liberal people will still have an element of discrimination subconsciously woven into them because of the fact that environmental problems, environmental issues impact the way that we perceive things. When we see mass terror, ISIS, problems with the Islamic world, that then impacts the way we see, which is a problem because it means we judge the many upon the few. And it means that, for instance, Muslims, Arabs, will get a bad reputation based on 1% of them. So then we can ask ourselves, are we subconsciously racist? And it'll be interesting to see what you think about this. Because I, for one, look at myself, and I come from an international community, and I would say that I'm not very discriminatory, but there have been times where, sure, an element in my mind has gone, I'd rather do this rather than that. And I think John Barnes does something here which many people don't, especially on Question Time, which is speak the truth. And I don't mind supporting him and coming out and saying, yes, there are times that there is some sort of subconscious discrimination, because, like he says, to say that we don't and to step back and say there isn't any discrimination is lies and false. Everyone will have an element of this within them, and it's interesting. And what we need to do is accept that fact and work to move over it and work to be more culturally integrated, more tolerant, and more accepting of people's views and where people are from. Because once you realise that everyone is subconsciously discriminatory, you found the root of the problem to why society has these problems of racism and the snowflake generation. And now what we can see and what we can suggest is that in the future, because of the way the environment impacts us, we can create a vision in which we can see that because of this cultural globalization and cultural integration, that perhaps in the future there will be less racial problems. And we can already see somewhat of a trend from looking at the 1800s with slavery and KKK and the American Civil War over slavery and everything, to have racial discrimination. So then now, where we have things like gay marriage and LGBT rights, black rights, and all these different initiatives to try and phase out racism. So there we go. I believe we've found the root of the society in the mind, in the subconsciousness, and it's been interesting to hear perhaps times where you've felt you have subconsciously discriminated. Because I think the first step to solving any issue is to firstly accept that there is some sort of issue at all. So thank you very much. See you next time.